Good morning. Some of you know me. I'm happy to be back today, but for those that don't or have forgotten me, I'm the Reverend Mr. Barb Grieve. My pronouns are he and him, and you are very welcome here at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Palo Alto. It is wonderful to be with you again. We gather, our different paths entwined to deepen our spiritual lives, nourishing connection, learning from each other, caring for each other, tending to our world. We've got plenty of open seats today, so if we start to fill up, scooch into the middle. We gather on unceded, stolen land of the Tanyan and Ramaytush people. We acknowledge these communities in the interest of truth and justice, awareness and gratitude. In order to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism, we pledge to join them whenever they ask for our solidarity. And while masks are not required, they are strongly encouraged. Our wastewater numbers are high this weekend. So we express our mutual respect by supporting one another's decisions about masking and distancing and other health measures. And if you are seated and would like a mask, our ushers are prepared to bring one to you. You just need to raise your hand. If you're here in person and have questions about Unitarian Universalism or this particular congregation, stop by the welcome table with the blue tablecloth and chat with a friendly member of the membership team after service. There you can leave your contact info if you want to receive notifications of upcoming events, and if this is the week you want to join the congregation, you can also do that there today. And now let us begin our service. James Luther Adams wrote, "Church is a place where we get to practice what it means to be human. So on this holy day, in this sacred space, may we be mindful to practice what it means to be human." With our centering words each week, we draw on the many sources of our living tradition. Today's words are adapted from Rochelle Faithful's No Harm protection spell, found in the Black Trans Prayer Book. Loving beings who surround us and inside us as we go on our way, we need your reflection. To invite the kindness of kindred, to attract genuine care, to welcome radical hospitality, we need your force. To send back viciousness from its source, to resist confusion of cowardice, to reject hate before it originates. In return, we offer you all of our excellence. We are only visible to rightness and beloveds. May we move with power today. It is so. As we follow the sound of the bell into silence, let us allow ourselves to arrive here fully. I want to invite up any children of body or spirit. If you feel so inclined, come on up. And if anybody wants to help spread out the quilt, I would love that. Our story this morning is one of my all-time favorites. Fluffy the Porcupine by Helen Lester, illustrated by Lynn Munsinger. When Mr. and Mrs. Porcupine had their first child, they were delighted. Now he needed a name. Should they call him Spike? No, Spike was too common. Should they call him Lance? No, Lance sounded too fierce. How about Needle Rooser? Too long. Prickles, Pokey, Quillian, all no. Let's call him Fluffy, they decided. It's such a pretty name, Fluffy. But soon there came a time when Fluffy began to doubt that he was Fluffy. He first became suspicious when he backed into a door and stuck fast. That was not a Fluffy thing to do. He was even more convinced when he accidentally slept on his back and poked holes into the mattress. A very unfluffy thing. When he tried to carry an umbrella, he knew the truth without a doubt. Fluffy definitely wasn't. So he decided to become fluffier. Clouds are fluffy, he thought. I'll be a cloud. But he couldn't stay up. I know. Pillows are fluffy, he said. I'll be a pillow. But when his mother sat on him, she was not pleased. He tried soaking in a bubble bath for 45 minutes, but he did not become fluffy. He became soggy. He tried whipped cream. He put a little on each quill. It was not easy, and it took more than half a day. But this did not make Fluffy fluffy. They should have named me Gooey, he said. He ate a lot of fluffy marshmallows, rolled in shaving cream and feathers. He even tried to become a bunny. But the truth remained, Fluffy wasn't. One afternoon, Fluffy set out for a walk trying to think of ways to become fluffy. Before long, he met a very large rhinoceros. Grrr, said the rhinoceros. I'm going to give you a rough time. Fluffy didn't know what a rough time was, but he didn't like the sound of that. What is your name, small prickly thing? Asked the rhinoceros. Fluffy, said Fluffy. The rhinoceros smiled. He giggled. He laughed out loud. He rolled on the ground. He jiggled and slapped his knees. He roared with laughter. A porcupine named Fluffy, howled the rhinoceros. Fluffy was embarrassed, but he tried to be polite. And what is your name? He asked. Heh, I can't say it. Heh, heh, heh. Hubert? Asked Fluffy. No. Ha, ha. Oh, help, I just can't say it. I'm laughing so hard, said the rhinoceros. Harold, offered Fluffy. Or Herman? No, gasped the rhinoceros. It's Hippo. Hippo? A rhinoceros named Hippo? Fluffy smiled. He giggled. He laughed out loud and rolled on the ground. He jiggled and slapped his knees. He roared with laughter. A rhinoceros named Hippo, he cried. A porcupine named Fluffy. A rhinoceros named Hippo. It was almost more than they could bear. Hippo and Fluffy rolled on the ground, giggling and laughing until tears came to their eyes. At last, they lay exhausted on the ground, and from that time on, they were the best of friends. And Fluffy didn't mind being Fluffy anymore, even though he wasn't. So ends our story this morning. My hope for all of us is that we find our equivalent to Fluffy and Hippo. We're going to sing I Know This Rose Is Open. We'll sing it 3 times through. If you're daring, I invite you to go into a round. And while we're singing, during the last verse or segment of the round, the children who want to go to religious education or summer programming can leave their seats and head to the back where Craig will welcome them. Well, then let us now take a few moments of silent prayer or meditation to hold all that has been said and not said with compassion and care. Blessed be. Instead of a reflection, since you're hearing my thoughts during the sermon, I want to share a reading with you this morning. This is a letter to my young sibs by Deja Baptiste. It comes from the Black Trans Prayer Book. When I really began to consider living my truth, transitioning and refusing the gender label and expectations I had been rebelling against and terrorized by all my life, I imagined the worst. One of my greatest fears was all I would lose: my family, my name, my place in the stories and histories I grew up on, and memories I'd been a part of making. I cried over the futures I thought I'd never get to have. On the other side of that, I've learned a few secrets. That I was not the first trans person in my family, my hometown, my church, my schools, or any of the neighborhoods I grew up in. We have always been here. We are infinite. I have maybe been the first who could live so openly and have as many choices for myself, my body, my names, and chosen family and careers as early as I have. But I was never the first. The ones before me held as much courage, every bit of will and magic in their breaths. We are the lineage of spirits who know that life, that flesh, has more to offer than any binary, that our souls, our spirits, hold more truth than the rules of power forced on us at our expense. Prophets, we are willing to face what comes to speak the truth of who we are. We are free. I was convinced to be terrified and apologized for what I would break or lose when I began to live as myself. I didn't trust the intuition that I was only forging new links in old chains. I couldn't see that I was healing, not cursing, the latch and dreams my parents held for me. I hadn't learned yet to tune into what is true, not only what we can see, hear, smell, taste, and touch, and receive the blessings of each and every one of my ancestors alive and dead. I feared dying for my truth, but I feared living in other people's shame, fear, regret, and lies even more. No one died, even though I was reborn. No one could have been buried or mourned where there is only a miracle to celebrate. I was a mother's daughter, a fatherless son. I gave myself a name when they refused to, and I studied and taught myself how to walk, speak, live in this new life of mine. Freedom tastes bitter and sweet at the same time. So ends our reading. I invite you to rise in body or spirit and join in hymn number 1051, We Are, by Yisei Barnwell. The words will be on screen and in the online order of service. Perhaps like many of you, I've known my gender since I was in kindergarten, which was a few years ago. I remember vividly the day when my kindergarten teacher asked us to draw a picture of what we were going to be when we grew up. Without hesitation, I began drawing a picture of my future self. I had no doubt that I would grow up to be a minister, and so I drew myself a picture of myself preaching a sermon from my congregation's pulpit. And because church was a formal affair back in New England, I drew myself wearing my best suit, holding a briefcase, and preaching from the pulpit. For those of you that are interested in dream analysis, I cannot for the life of me figure out the briefcase. As my teacher walked around the classroom, he congratulated each of the students on both our career choices and artwork. When he arrived at my place, he took a quick look at my picture and asked me whom I had drawn. You see, I was sitting there in a pretty purple dress, and I explained that the person in the drawing was indeed me. He told me I was wrong. I wouldn't grow up to be a man because only boys could do that. It would take me almost 20 more years before I tried to explain my gender to someone again. In those 20 years, I didn't question my gender identity. I knew what it was, but I lacked the language and cultural understandings to explain what I knew. You probably remember this almost as much as I do, but just to remind us all, these were the times before email and the internet. We didn't have that kind of communication in the public sphere. There were few ways to find other folks who were also trans. For me, in my childhood, my family would summer on Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and each year we would take a trip into that gay town, as it was known then, Provincetown. I would be fascinated by the beautiful drag queens who would be roller skating up and down the streets in all their glory, advertising whatever shows they were in that night. Inherently I knew that they were my people, and yet I also knew I was not one of them. So somewhere in that long arc of journey, in those 20 years while I was still waiting for language, I began to explain my gender, not as transitioning between two genders or from one gender to another, but rather as transcending the gender dichotomy of man and woman. I didn't have the language or labels at the time. I still had never heard the word transgender. It wasn't until years later, in my first week of working at the UUA, that I was introduced to Leslie Feinberg's groundbreaking book, Transgender Warriors. And finally, I had language and historical context to articulate my gender more accurately. It was 1995. So I came out very publicly as transgender, as I only know how to do, and I chose to keep my name Barb, adding the prefix Mr., and thus beginning my use of masculine pronouns. At the time, none of the quote-unquote newer pronouns appealed to me, and I lacked the imagination and confidence to create my own. My coming out was fairly uneventful. One day I was not known as trans, and the next day I was known as trans, joining the small but mighty group of those of us trying to bust the gender binary and calling ourselves third gender, or what today might be called genderqueer or non-binary. I'm fortunate in that my workplace, family, and faith accepted me for who I was, though in all three places some people struggled with language and some forgot their basic manners, asking ridiculous and often offensive questions about my body, questions that one shouldn't ask someone unless explicitly invited to do so. As I said, when I came out as transgender, I chose to go by Mr. Barb and claim third gender or genderqueer. It was a radical act. There were few to none of us using that verbiage. Within the transgender communities of the time, there was a push to acquiesce to heteronormativity and embrace the gender binary. Those who were seeking to medically transition were expected to erase their pasts and live fully as their new gender, with no reference to who they had been or were. Almost everyone I met who was out seemed so old to my then 20-something self. Now that I'm in my mid-50s, I wonder just how old/young they really were. As a queer and trans person, it was frustrating to watch the mainstream UU movement slowly embrace the message of becoming more tolerant of heteronormative gays and lesbians, while continuing to perpetuate oppression and exclusion towards LGBTQ people who weren't interested in or able to assimilate into mainstream culture. By the late 1990s, Matthew Shepard's murder in '98 and the burgeoning same-sex marriage movement had motivated a lot of straight cisgender UUs to become active allies. But there was a huge resistance to bisexual, queer, and trans welcome. At the state and national levels, I watched as our UU advocacy work on trans rights was intentionally sacrificed in favor of same-sex marriage advocacy work with anti-trans, interfaith, and gay and lesbian organizing partners. It was an isolating time to be trans, both in Unitarian Universalism and in the world. Online forms of connection were in their infancy, email wasn't yet widespread, and long-distance phone calls, you remember those things? They were expensive. So the trans communities existed only in hyper-local or word-of-mouth ways. And because of the way systemic oppression operates to turn people with marginalized identities against each other, there was also, unfortunately, a lot of infighting among the few groups that did exist. This often broke down along fault lines of gender, race, class, ability, desire or lack of desire for medical transition, and the desire or ability to be out or stealth. Stealth meaning nobody would know. Within Unitarian Universalism, trans leaders were desperately few and far between. Although the denomination had made a commitment with a 1980 business resolution to remove barriers to employment for lesbian, gay, and bisexual religious leaders, the same commitment had not been made to trans leaders until 2024. When the General Assembly passed a comprehensive and unwavering business resolution titled, "Embracing Transgender, Non-Binary, Intersex, and Gender-Diverse People is a Fundamental Expression of Our UU Religious Values." You don't get more specific than that. But that was just 2 summers ago. Going back in my story, a year after I came out, I found myself speaking on a panel at the Female to Male International Conference. I was advocating that one did not need to take hormones nor alter their body to be included in what we would now call the trans-masculine communities. I was arguing that gender was more expansive than the gender binary conservative voices would have us believe. That gender, like life, is fluid and expansive, and as a trans and queer community, we should be making space for a wide variety of presentations rather than policing ourselves to fit into the mainstream. Our message was not well received by the majority of the conference participants, who were fearful that our very existence, would jeopardize their safety and acceptance in mainstream culture. What they didn't realize then is that our individual and collective safety is never guaranteed. It's been almost 30 years since I came out publicly. In the past 30 years, I've witnessed beautiful moments of support and horrific acts of violence. I've witnessed our queer communities pull together, and I've mourned as some of us sacrifice others to gain a seat at the so-called welcoming table. A table often designed and used to control power and maintain a sense of who does and who doesn't belong in community. My heart has broken time and again when some of us have reached for validation from the dominant culture by discounting or denigrating others in our community, policing who is and who isn't queer enough or palpable enough to represent us. Sometimes, though, I have to remind myself of how far we have come, particularly in the recent years when the number of state bills and national legislation control our bodies and lives have been made and are on the rise. In 2019, there were just 30 legislative bills introduced that directly impacted trans lives. And as of this morning, according to the Trans Legislation Tracker's website, the 2025 count is up to 969 bills in 49 states and another 82 bills at the national level. And those don't include executive orders from our president. These are bills that, as you would imagine and might know, they impact bathroom use, medical access, athletics, housing, military service and benefits, incarceration, education, legal documentation, and more. The increase is not by coincidence. As this year's Weir lecturer and creator of Translash Media, Amara Jones, reminded us during General Assembly, the politically conservative think tanks have invested millions of dollars into researching which issues would instigate the most attention and have the biggest impact on enraging and scaring the masses. This is how they came to focus their efforts on targeting transgender children and teens using a framework of protection while really putting more and more lives at risk. As we can see from the recent rescinding of retirement benefits for transgender U.S. Air Force members, they are not limiting their focus to children anymore. It's just a topic that keeps them raking in money and keeping us all in a panic. So if you had asked me 30 years ago if I thought we would have some of the ballasts to all of this, some of the progress that we have made over those 30 years have included gender-inclusive bathrooms at General Assembly and in our churches, even in major airports like SFO, or that state-issued identifications would include options beyond male and female, that minors and adults would have access to hormone blockers, that we would know how to research things, that in some places they are available to help youngins live into themselves without the trauma of their bodies changing unnecessarily. Or one of my favorites, that trans characters in television shows and movies are regularly shown characters and not the victim nor the perpetrator, but just another character. If you had told me all this and more would be possible, I would have laughed at you and told you that you were dreaming the impossible dream. I likely would have suggested that maybe one of those things might come true if we all got organized together, but I wouldn't bet on it. Of course, 30 years ago, I also wouldn't have believed that the internet would be used as it is today, or that I could be preaching to you from an electronic tablet instead of paper, through a video feed. So that shows you how limited my imagination is. But we have made progress. The fact that we do see representation everywhere, that despite the laws or the attempts to legalize and legislate bodies, most of those laws are failing. That we gather together to advocate for one another and for everyone. That comprehensive sexuality education includes all types of bodies and genders and not just cisgendered people. That we normalized the sharing of our pronouns, not so that we can make someone feel uncomfortable, but that we can include everyone with us. The changes I've witnessed over the last 52 years sometimes bring tears to my eyes and heart. As a young kindergartner, I had no role models, no place to go with my knowing of myself, and no one to advocate for me in the school systems and wider world. When I began working as a youth advisor and then at the UUA, the calls I got from parents of kindergartners articulating that they were transgender at the time were focused on asking what was wrong with their children and telling me they needed time to grieve the lost dreams. The calls I get now from parents of kindergartners and children are about how to navigate the school systems and the legal systems and the medical systems so that they can protect their children. And I want to give a shout out to this congregation. It was here in 2017, while serving as your sabbatical religious educator, that I was asked this for the first time by a family in this congregation. You shifted the way I thought about the work we were doing. If I'm honest, many days I feel weighted down by the mountain still before us. But when I think about how much things have changed in 30 years, I find a glimmer of hope in the conversations I have with young folks who are celebrating gender fluidity instead of feeling isolated and without words for who they are. I find hope in the parents whose first concern is how to advocate for their children and not how to fix their children. When I co-founded the Transgender Religious UUs Together organization in the early 2000s, there were only 5 of us that identified outly as transgender and were religious professionals within our faith. At last count, we had well over 100 members. At a retreat 2 years ago, there were more people there I did not know and did not know me than I knew, which was very cool and disconcerting. But I'm astonished to continuously be in religious gatherings where there are trans folks I haven't met or heard about, both in professional gatherings and in our congregations. As much as I fear the barriers we are and may still face, I am so blessedly amazed and grateful for those of us choosing to live our faith fully in the face of discrimination and oppression. Our communities are coming together beautifully, and the need to do so has never been more so than now. For me, being grounded in our Unitarian Universalist faith, with its core as process theology and love at the center, offers me a framework that we co-create within the holy to bring the holy into being to save the world. It saves me every day. This grounding time and again has held me as I navigated the world, knowing who I was and not knowing anyone around me that was like me. This grounding that encouraged me to take risks and trust in the community's ability and determination to love the hell out of me and the world. I know I'm one of the lucky ones. Our tradition and institution sustain me in the hours when my reason and the world around me tell me that life is without meaning. Our religious communities give me love and encouragement when I believe that I cannot continue. In looking out at your beautiful faces, I am renewed in hope. And so, in closing, I offer you the closing words from the American version of the television series, Queer as Folk. Now, you have to imagine a gay dance club with its, stereotypical yet classic disco ball hanging and spinning in the top, with some thumping, good bass thumping music happening for this scene to work for you. So you've got that in your mind. They write the very last phrases of the show. So the thumpa continues. It always will, no matter what happens, no matter who is president. As Our Lady of Disco, the divine Miss Gloria Gaynor has always sung to us, we will survive. May we each continue to live our UU faith boldly and unapologetically, always keeping love at the center and leaning on community care so that we all survive. May it be so. Amen. invite you to rise in body or spirit as we sing our final song, Fire of Commitment, which is 1028 in the Teal Hymn Book, and we'll have some words up on the screens. Whether online or here in the main hall, please stay after the benediction for our conversation time and lunch. We will begin with greeting time, a chance to speak to someone you haven't met, or just to greet one another. If you're online, I invite you to unmute yourself, to turn on your video and touch hands virtually like this. And I'm supposed to demonstrate, but I have no idea what I'm doing. Oh, thank you. Like this. And if you're here physically in the main hall or in the patio, I invite you to rise as you're willing and able and to reach out to hold hands if you and the person next to you are comfortable with that, or to show that you are connected in spirit by crossing your hands over your heart. Out. Be of good courage. Hold fast to what is good. Return no evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the suffering. Rejoice in beauty. Speak love with word and deed. Honor all beings. Blessings and go in peace.